You warm a bottle, listen to the steady hush of a heater, and glance at a baby monitor like it's a tiny security guard. The door locks, the tap runs clean. If something goes wrong, urgent care is a short drive away. Now take it all away. No walls, no locks, no thermostat, no pantry, no clean water on demand, no doctor, no lights, no weather app, and definitely no one delivering anything. Just a small child, outside, with darkness and rain doing what they've always done. A toddler sits near a low fire while rain hisses as it hits the coals. The edge of camp is only a few steps away, and beyond it the world is moving, even when you can't see what's moving. Human children are dependent for years. In a place like this, that should be a survival disaster. So here's the question. If you removed every modern safety net, how could a small child survive a single night in prehistoric life? And to be clear, ancient humans weren't one single group. Different kinds of humans lived in different times and places, from early Homo to Neanderthals and Denisovans to Homo sapiens. But across prehistoric life, the basic problem doesn't change. A toddler can't outrun danger, can't find reliable food, and can't stay warm alone. The toddler inches closer to the fire. Before one parent can even stand up, the camp reacts. One adult feeds the flames and pulls the heat back to life. Another scoops the child up and shifts them away from the coals. Someone else checks the shelter against the rain. Another person stays facing outward, listening. That's the secret. The world wasn't safe. The camp was. Warmth, watchfulness, shared food, and many caregivers turned people into infrastructure. Okay, warmth and watchfulness buy time. But what about the most basic problem? What did a child actually eat after milk wasn't enough? A spoon clinks against a bowl in a way you'd never notice in your kitchen, because your kitchen is basically an insurance policy made of cabinets. Out here, that sound means someone managed to turn a day of hunting and gathering into something a small child can actually swallow. The child leans in, reaching. The adults don't hand over a tough strip of meat and wish them luck. They tear it into tiny bits. They mash plants until the sharp edges are gone. Someone tests the heat, then blows on the bite before it goes into a waiting mouth. This is the feeding stage people forget. Breast milk can buffer a newborn, and research on breastfeeding and weaning shows that the transition away from milk can be a high-risk time, and it varies a lot between groups and individuals. But there's an in-between child who's no longer living safely on milk alone and also can't reliably forage. So what was more dangerous for prehistoric humans? Right after birth or during weaning? Weaning hit a cliff. Once milk wasn't enough, survival depended on soft, safe foods and on other people consistently sharing. Then it goes wrong. The child coughs, fusses, tries to chew, can't. The food is too tough, too hot, too dry, too easy to choke on. An older hand takes it back, tears it smaller, mashes it, and returns a softened bite. That's the trick. It wasn't find your own food. It was someone makes food child-sized. In many hunter-gatherer societies, food sharing and provisioning help cover this gap, and archaeology hints at shared hearth spaces and cooking that could support softer foods. Modern baby food aisles make calories look automatic. In prehistoric life, the camp had to manufacture reliability by processing and passing food along. If food had to be shared and processed like this, who had the hands and time to do it when adults also had to hunt, gather, and keep everyone safe? Someone coughs as the wind flips, and the smoke that was harmless a second ago suddenly stings everyone's eyes. An adult stands up fast, shifts a rough windbreak, and the whole problem changes. Another person tugs a child back under a low shelter of hide and brush. A baby gets pulled tight against a caregiver's chest, held there like a living seatbelt as the group starts packing to move. That's the part modern life hides. You can miss a weather alert and still have a thermostat. You can forget a jacket and still have a car. So how did early humans reduce the everyday killer's cold nights, exposure, getting lost, and accidents without houses or strollers? They built a safe zone. Not a wall, not a lock, a layout. For small bodies, survival isn't just about food, it's physics. Kids lose heat faster because they have more skin compared to their weight, and their temperature control is weaker. Wet clothing, wind, and a long, cold night can turn uncomfortable into dangerous. Hearths and repeated-use living areas show up at many archaeological sites, even though it varies by time and place. Where there was fire, there was warmth, light, and a center point that pulled people inward. Then the storm hits. Nobody toughs it out. In minutes, they reorganize. The fire is protected, the shelter is tightened, and children are moved to the inside of the human cluster. Safety isn't bravery, it's distance. Keep kids close, keep them dry, keep them inside the warm boundary. Carriers don't preserve well, but across many small-scale societies, infants are carried constantly. Ancient humans likely paid in muscle, attention, and non-stop proximity. If children had to be kept close, watched, carried, and warmed, how did any one caregiver do that while also working for food? A phone buzzes with a calendar alert. Daycare drop-off, sitter at 6, pickup at 5:30. Modern childcare comes with time slots and invoices. Now take away the building, the schedule, and the paid backup, and put a small child beside a fire while rain and darkness press at the edge of camp. A mother is nursing an infant. She can't stop that job halfway. Nearby, an older child keeps a toddler busy with a little pebble game, hands moving, attention captured. An elder works food with patient fingers until it's soft enough to swallow. Another adult isn't doing any of that. They're just watching the tree line, because danger doesn't care that someone is teething. If mothers were central, why wasn't ancient childcare a one-person job? Because one caregiver can't do everything at once. You can nurse, or you can forage. You can fetch water, or you can keep a toddler from wandering. You can rebuild shelter after a storm, or you can stare into the dark and listen for trouble. And if you're injured, exhausted, or simply gone for an hour, a child doesn't get to pause their needs. Here's the part that makes the system work. The mother steps away for just minutes. Nothing collapses. The older child shifts closer. The elder offers another bite. The watcher adjusts position without being asked. The parent is a network. After you've seen it, you can name it. Alloparenting, care by non-mothers. Not a fixed job title, but a flexible set of hands that can watch, carry, comfort, feed, and teach. Human evolution models of cooperative breeding and many ethnographic studies point to multi-caregiver childcare as a common pattern, even when it isn't gentle or perfectly fair. It's informal daycare that never really closes. So kids were kept warm, fed, and watched. But how did they become competent enough to stop being a constant liability? A kid grips a straight stick, jabs it at the dirt, and pretends it's a spear. Another scrapes a rock across a hide scrap the way they've watched adults do, making the same impatient little mistakes. So what did prehistoric children do all day, and how did that keep them alive later? A lot of their job was watching. They tracked where grown-ups went, how they held tools, which plants got picked and which got left alone, and what everyone did when weather turned or animals got close. Studies of hunter-gatherer children suggest this kind of learning by observing, then trying, is constant. And a long human childhood wasn't just years of being carried around. It was time to build complicated skills that can't be downloaded in a weekend. They helped in small ways that scaled up. Older kids carried little bundles, copied knot tying, practiced throws, and learned the rhythm of cooperating without anyone giving a lecture. Then there's the moment that matters most. A child edges too close to the hearth and almost touches the flame. Instead of screaming, an adult calmly draws a boundary in the dirt, a safe ring around the fire, and shows where feet can go. The child copies it. That's how survival knowledge travels, socially, minute by minute, before a mistake costs a life. Modern school often separates learning from real stakes. For ancient humans, learning was embedded in camp life, like apprenticeship mixed with free play. Archaeology even hints at it. Small tools, sloppy practice marks, and footprints that say kids were right there. Even with growing skills, kids still got sick and hurt. Without antibiotics or hospitals, what could a camp realistically do? A kid wakes up hot, shivering, and too weak to keep up. Today you'd take a temperature, text a doctor, and hope the pharmacy is still open. For ancient humans, there was no clinic, no antibiotics, and no quick fix. When a child was sick or hurt, what could ancient humans do that actually mattered? They could do the boring, life-saving things. Keep the child warm near a steady fire, get water into them a little at a time, feed soft foods they can swallow and keep down, clean a cut, cover it, and keep dirt and flies off it. Most of all, keep the child close and protected when they're at their weakest. And sometimes that meant the whole group paid for it. The planned travel stops early because the child can't walk. Someone shifts the load and carries them anyway. Another person stays up tending the fire so the warmth doesn't fade. Someone brings water. An older child waves insects away. The camp goes quieter, not out of sentiment, but because rest is part of the treatment. Here's the myth to drop. No medicine doesn't mean no care. Supportive care alone can change survival odds in many illnesses and injuries. We don't see this directly in the ground, but we do find people who lived with healed injuries or long-lasting conditions, including some Neanderthal cases that researchers interpret as consistent with extended help. Today, we call it urgent care and prescriptions. Back then, the prescription was time, heat, calories, and someone choosing to carry you. So how do we know any of this is more than a comforting story? What clues can archaeology actually give us about prehistoric children and care? You find a tiny shoe print in wet cement on a sidewalk and instantly know two things. A child was here, and an adult let them get close enough to leave it. In deep prehistory, we don't find diapers, baby monitors, or parenting manuals. We find impressions and leftovers. So if prehistoric parenting rarely fossilizes, what evidence suggests children were cared for, and why does it matter for human evolution? Start with the mud. Archaeologists have found small footprints pressed into ancient ground surfaces. Some sets drift at the edge, then angle inward. The surprise is where they go, toward the center where people cooked, worked, and stayed close. Then there are handprints on cave walls, scaled to small palms. Not a diary, not a confession of feelings, just a physical signature that kids were present in places that were dark, risky, and visited with others. Near old hearths, there are miniature tools and clumsy practice flakes, the kinds of mistakes you get when learning. And across camps, the spatial pattern repeats. Safer, warmer, busier zones clustered around fire, with traces that include children. Burials add one more clue. When a child is intentionally placed and protected by soil and objects, it tells you the group treated that small life as part of the community. Ethnographic analogy helps, but it isn't a time machine. The stronger logic is life history. Humans evolved a long, slow childhood, and that only works if a whole camp can afford it. Follow those tiny footprints from the camp edge to the hearth, and you get the point. Even when care doesn't fossilize, ancient humans organized life around keeping kids alive long enough to learn. And later, that same child grows into the helper who carries a younger one. If our species was shaped by shared care, what parts of human nature are really the result of protecting the most vulnerable? If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for future videos.